Hi there. Welcome to Intent to Form training for new student organizations. My name is Amy Prouse, she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Student Involvement. This training is for student leaders who are working to start a brand new student organization. All right, and to begin. All right, so for new student organizations, we're going to talk about the guidelines, expectations, and annual requirements for these organizations. So to start with, we'll discuss the pre-registration process that is specifically designed for new student organizations. So first, you must have 5 or more enrolled students interested in forming the organization. You must have at least 1 president, 1 treasurer. These people cannot be the same student. And then you must have at least 3 additional members. These 3 additional members can serve in other executive role positions, or they can just be members. Additionally, you must have identified an employee of the TTU Lubbock campus to take on the role of faculty staff advisor. You must then submit the intent to form request. You must then attend a meeting with a student involvement staffer to discuss the compliance process for the new student organization itself. After you meet with a student involvement staffer to discuss this process, you can then begin your series of trainings, starting with the intent to form training that you are attending now. All non-registered student groups who are completing their new org training will be put on a 30-day temporary status, enabling them to use student org resources on campus to recruit members, develop a constitution and bylaws, and function temporarily as a student organization to assist with the building of the group. To continue with our annual compliance process, the annual compliance process for all student organizations is conducted by the Office of Student Involvement. This includes compliance processes for new student organizations, as well as compliance process for our existing student organizations as well. So the annual requirements after registering as a new student organization are as follows. Org leaders are responsible for completing student org leader orientation each spring semester, which is different from completing student org leader orientation for new student organizations. Solo every spring semester for existing organizations will include a variety of mandatory university trainings, including student org risk management training and the assessment, and a registration training or tutorial to help you register your org. There are several other learning modules within this training as well, and you'll be required to complete those while you're completing the entire playlist. Org leaders must also maintain awareness of their org's Tech Connect status. So in Tech Connect, there are 2 different statuses that are assigned to all organizations within the platform. These statuses are either active or frozen. So if your organization shows to be active, this means that your organization is compliant in all required areas. However, if at some point your organization shows up to be frozen, this just means that there is maybe a lack of attendance to or completion of any mandatory org trainings. It means maybe that there was a mishap that happened in the submission of the org's registration, or that maybe not all requirements for risk management were completed in an adequate time period. But when an organization turns frozen, you can simply contact our office and we can help diagnose with you why the organization is frozen and what steps you need to take to unfreeze or thaw out the organization to become active again. All right, so part of starting a brand new student organization is to develop a constitution and bylaws document for your org. The student handbook, specifically section N of the student handbook, mandates the sections that have to occur in the organization's constitution. So there are 12 required sections of an organization constitution, with the 13th section being recommended yet not required. So while this specific training is not going to go directly into the details of each of these sections, we will read over and give a brief overview of these 12 required sections. So the first 2 required sections are the name and purpose of the organization. So the organization's official name and a statement of what the purpose of the organization is. What is the purpose of its functioning, the purpose of the existence on this campus. The second and third requirements are membership requirements and the membership selection process. So when we discuss membership requirements, that is where you lay out the exact requirements that members have to meet to become a member of the organization. And then the membership selection process, which is basically how members are selected to join the organization. Then we move into membership accountability and removal. So membership accountability is just that. How is the organization holding members accountable for maintaining standards of the Texas Tech Student Code of Conduct and the expectations of the organization? And then upon not meeting expectations, what are our processes to remove a member from our organization? Next, we have an anti-discrimination statement that must be included in the Constitution. Section 6 needs to outline officer titles and duties. Section 7 needs to outline how the organization elects officers and what processes are in place to impeach or remove an officer from their elected office. Next, we move into a section that outlines the organization's department or external relationships. This simply just means to explain any affiliations that your organization has with any other org that is part of Texas Tech or could be an external entity to Texas Tech. And then if your organization has no affiliations and they're an independent org and standalone, you just explain that in this section. Next, we move into section 9, which is financial procedures. This is just explaining the checks and balances that are in place to allow transparent management of organization funding. Our 10th section are procedures for decision-making, such as when you outline how your organization meets quorum, and then what are the processes for voting in your organization. Our 11th section outlines the faculty, staff, advisors selection process and the responsibilities and expectations of this advisor. And our last mandatory section is parliamentary authority, which basically just outlines what type of parliamentary procedure that your organization chooses to use to conduct its meetings. The recommended but not required section is the risk management policy. Some organizations are mandated to have a risk management policy included in their constitution. Other organizations, you're not required to, yet our office does recommend that a risk management policy is developed and included in the organization's constitution. Moving on to the advisor agreement form. So an advisor agreement form must be signed and completed by the either staff member or faculty member who has agreed to serve in the capacity of the advisor for the organization. Without an advisor agreement form, any registration submission will be automatically denied, and you will not be able to move along in the new org formation process. Basically, the president and any other additional officers are recommended to meet with their newly acquired advisor to obtain the signature on the advisor agreement form, but more importantly, to discuss the role of the advisor to the organization, to also discuss the role of the advisor to the officer team and to the membership of the org. And there's going to need to be a pretty in-depth conversation about the responsibilities and expectations of the advisor to the officer team and to the organization, and vice versa, what the advisor expects of the leadership team and of the organization as well. It's always a good idea to discuss the goals of the organization with the advisor. And then at the end of this discussion, it should result in a signing of the advisor agreement form. That form itself will then be uploaded to the registration in Tech Connect when you get to that spot. Moving on to the topic of student org finances, it's very important that as org leaders, you understand that the university and student involvement do not regulate or meddle in any student organization bank accounts. Bank accounts are to be kept externally to the institution itself. And the org leaders and the advisor are the sole responsibility holders of any student org funding and any student organization bank accounts. Now, to set up a bank account, there is a process in place for that. What you need to do to successfully open a bank account is first register your organization. So ideally, you will complete student org leader orientation for new student orgs. At the end of this training, you will then be, at the end of this course, you will then be able to move into the registration piece of the new org formation process. Once you submit the registration for your organization and it is approved by our office, you can then focus on opening a bank account for your student organization. To open a bank account, you need to have applied for an employee identification number through the IRS. We can supply resources to the IRS's webpage to better help you find the EIN application webpage instead of you searching through all of the IRS's web pages. Once you obtain an EIN from the IRS, you then need to reach out to our office to ask for a letter of recognition from student involvement that basically just says X student organization is a legitimate, recognized, compliant student organization on the Texas Tech campus. Together with your employee identification number documentation and your letter of recognition from our office, you will take those two documents to your banking entity of choice, which will allow them to open a bank account in the name of your student organization. We do offer on our website some student org finance resources. We have a new organization treasurer information packet that was developed by Red to Black Peer Financial Coaching and SGA. We also have pages on our website that offer information on taxes and EIN FAQs, applying for tax exempt status, and then a few tips to prevent the mishandling of org funds. Moving into the organization types and how we organize student organizations here in the Office of Student Involvement. One type of organization are sport clubs. Sport clubs are overseen by Rec Sports, specifically Brett Jackson and Matt Gianotis. If a student organization decides to seek sport club status, they must be completely compliant with student involvement for 1 academic year. After 1 year of registration with student involvement, they can then request a meeting with Rec Sports personnel to initiate the application process to become a sport club and affiliated with the Rec Center. Although sport clubs, once they obtain the status, they're still required to complete all compliance requirements with student involvement on an annual basis. Benefits of becoming a sport club are that these clubs receive funding from Rec Sports, but a disadvantage of being a sport club is you are not eligible for SGA funding. Rather, you are eligible for only Rec Sports funding, and then the few supplementary student organization fundings that exist. The next type of org type is fraternities and sororities. They are the responsibility of student involvement and the Fraternity and Sorority Life Office here on campus. They are overseen specifically by Director Joey Lorette, Associate Director Alexis Ortiz, and Assistant Director Robbie Guilford. If you are a group seeking single-sex social fraternity or sorority status, you must first be recognized by one of the 4 governing councils. Those are the Interfraternity Council, the College Panhellenic Council, the Multicultural Greek Council, or the National Panhellenic Council. The group must also show Title IX exemption by uploading this letter to their registration. This letter is from their national affiliate and aligns with IRS 501, their 501 number, or yes, their 501. I think that when I do see whatever, it corrects it to something else in the presentation, but they also must register annually with student involvement. So if you know that your organization upon conception is going to be a fraternity or a sorority, you already have all of these documents in place because the national chapter, the national headquarters of this chapter has probably provided those to you. All right, and then we have our registered student organizations. So when we think about the total number of student organizations that are on our Texas Tech campus, we have approaching 600 student organizations, and with 35 of them being sport clubs and 55 of them being Greek life, the rest of those 600 organizations are what we consider general student organizations. So you can see how general student organizations make up the majority of student organizations on this campus. Specifically, general student organizations are the sole responsibility of the Office of Student Involvement and are overseen by me, Emily Warren, Administrator, and Stephanie Lamar, Administrator for Student Involvement. And the reason why we call these organizations gen orgs, or general orgs, is just because they choose not to affiliate with Rec Sports or with a governing council of a fraternity or a sorority. They may choose to affiliate with a TTU college or department or an external entity from Texas Tech, and they still are required to register annually with student involvement. Underneath org categories, underneath org types, we have what we call organization categories. Organization categories are used in Tech Connect to help the student body filter through the types of organizations that exist in that platform and to help their search of organizations be a little easier. So we have about 12 to 13 individual categories of student organizations. Categories become important when you actually register your new organization for the first time, and then when you re-register your organization every year after this. You want to ensure that when you come to this part of the registration process, you don't choose more than 2 of these categories, because the more categories you choose, the more diluted the filter becomes when the student body are trying to search for specific organizations that fall in their interest profile. So if you're an organization that your mission and goals surround, the 2 categories of pre-law and political, then those are the ones that you pick. If you are a sport club and are also hobby, leisure, recreation, those are the 2 that you pick. So we encourage you to only pick the 2 that most properly align with your mission and purpose of your organization. For non-compliant student organizations, there's really not much you can do on campus. If you are an unregistered, non-compliant student org, no one knows who you are on this campus. No one will provide you with resources. You will be directed to our office and asked to complete the intent to form process. So basically what you need to know is if you do not complete the new organization formation process, if you don't register your org and complete risk management requirements, whether that's now or 3 years from now, if 3 years have passed by and leadership does not transition appropriately, there is a chance that your organization could at some point become a non-compliant org. We do have processes in place to help those organizations become compliant once again, but just know that if your organization does not complete annual compliance requirements, no one on this campus knows who your org is, even if your organization has existed for 40 plus consecutive years. Missing 1 year of a compliance process erases a lot of institutional history from your organization. So the most important thing to know is always stay compliant, always be checking your compliance status with our office, because we do not want an organization to become non-compliant, because it really is like new phone who this. We don't know who you are. Okay, so moral of the story, always be compliant. Moving through the annual compliance process a little bit deeper, we're actually going to talk specifics about the annual compliance process. And when we talk about the annual compliance process, this specifically will take effect after you complete the new org registration process. So you might complete the new org registration process right before the end of this fall semester, and then come the beginning of the spring semester in February, you're going to be asked to re-register your org as an existing student org, so you can fall into that every year pattern during the annual compliance process season. So the compliance season, which will occur after new org registration, will basically begin with student org leader orientation, which is the virtual course that student org leaders are required to complete as one piece of the compliance process. This course will open on February 1st of each spring semester, and it will close on the first day of fall classes. So really, student org leaders have 6.5 months to complete all student org compliance requirements. After the compliance deadline, which is the first day of fall classes, organizations will be frozen, yet orgs can still become compliant by moving through our reinstatement process. Annual compliance process continued. This process must be completed by all organization types. It must be completed annually. That includes gen orgs, sport clubs, fraternities and sororities, law school orgs, vet school orgs. On all of the campuses where we oversee the compliance process, those organizations are completing the compliance process within the spring semester. Additionally, all orgs must be compliant to participate in any summer organization fairs. So if we think about when the compliance season occurs from February through August, if you have plans for your organization to participate in any summer campus events, such as Red Raider Orientation Student Org Fairs or Raider Welcome Week, the first few weeks of August when school starts back, you need to be compliant before summer begins. So in the months of February, March, April, and May, you should be becoming compliant so you can participate in campus events in June, July, and August. And registration and risk management assessment will always take place in Tech Connect. So the benefits of being a compliant student organization are listed on this slide. Once you become a compliant student org, you have access to reserve space for free all across campus, whether that be within the student union building, across academic spaces, or outside by attaining grounds use approval. You also receive access to be able to reserve a mailbox in the student union, reserve a storage locker in the student union, have your org's information published online through your Tech Connect page, post flyers around campus, attend various leadership trainings, obtain, become eligible and apply for student org funding and any other supplementary funding that exists on campus for student organizations. A benefit of being an org, this stuff isn't necessarily a benefit of being an org because it's telling you something you can't do. But by being a registered student organization, a compliant student org, you can create your own official logo. However, in the creation of that official student org logo, you cannot use the double T. You cannot use copyrighted images. You also cannot use the words Texas Tech or Red Raiders in the title of your student organization. So make sure that when you're creating an official logo, you refrain from using those words and those images. And when you are creating a social media page, also, please do not label yourself as Texas Tech or Red Raiders anything on your social media page as well. When you do come up with a logo for your organization, please contact me so I can provide to you the brand review email for marketing and communications, which are the folks that need to approve your logo for your organization. Requirements to maintain your compliance status or your registration status each year are to, number one, make sure that your roster in Tech Connect for your organization is always as up to date as possible. Really, this applies to any changes to officers or your advisor of your org. If there are changes to an officer or an advisor or multiple officers, you want to make sure that changes are reflected on your Tech Connect roster within 10 days of those changes taking place. You also want to ensure that your organization is conducting affairs in a lawful manner and abiding by university policies and procedures. You want to seek clarification from SGA and student involvement in situations involving possible solicitation on campus. You also want to ensure that off-campus individuals or organizations whose appearance on campus is sponsored by your organization observe policies and rules of the university. And then lastly, student involvement and student conduct do reserve the right to suspend a registration of an organization for non-compliance with regulations set forth in the student handbook and the student code of conduct. All right, so student organization risk management training. Here's what new orgs need to know about risk management training. Risk training is part of the Texas Education Code, specifically section 51.9361. It is Texas state law, and student organizations who do not complete the requirements for risk management training are not abiding by Texas state law. All registered student organizations are required to complete training on the topic of risk management. All registered student organizations are required to submit the post-training assessment to receive credit for completing the mandatory training. Risk management training itself, the video that you are required to watch, the content you're required to watch, is only now offered within student org leader orientation. That is for in new org training and for existing student orgs. So upon completion of this training, student org leader orientation of this course, you will actually be prompted to complete the risk management assessment when you complete watching that module. And you will receive all mandatory risk management training within the student org leader orientation course itself. Okay, so there is not any external risk management training that you need to attend because risk management is a module that is included in student org leader orientation for you. The risk management deadlines are the same deadlines as that of student org leader orientation and the compliance process as a whole. So risk training opens with Solo because risk management training is a module within Solo content. The opening date is February 1st, and the closing date is the first day of fall classes. There is never a deadline extension for risk management training because of mandated reporting due to it being a state law. New student org training requirements. So as part of the new student org formation process, students that are moving through this process will need to complete student org leader orientation for new student orgs, which is what you are beginning to complete right now. Solo for new student orgs includes this training, student org intent to form training. It also includes student org risk management training. You must be completely risk compliant to finish the intent to form process. So without submitting that post-training assessment, you would not be a completely compliant new organization, okay? And then that solo content will contain any additional training set forth by student involvement. It does contain about 7 or 8 additional modules that are all required for you to complete to become a brand new student organization. After completion of this course, you will receive a certificate of completion that basically says your name, have completed student org leader orientation for new student organizations. You will save that certificate of completion. You will then move into Tech Connect to begin the registration submission piece of the compliance process. You will upload the certificate of completion to your new org registration submission. Then you will be able to submit your registration in Tech Connect. All right, so annual training requirements. Just to reiterate, your compliance training requirements are all included in the student org leader orientation in Solo, which is the virtual orientation that includes all mandatory trainings that student org leaders must complete to be an active compliant student org. Solo will always open on February 1st of every spring semester. It must be completed before submitting your student org's registration. The training in this course provides, the modules in this course provide training surrounding registration, campus resources, and risk management training. You're required that organizations have at least one officer, preferably the president, completing this entire course. We highly discourage the attendance of faculty staff advisors to complete Solo because ultimately student organizations are student-led, so it should be the students who are doing the required work within the organization. And just to reiterate, risk management training is included in student org leader orientation. It is one module within the entire course. You will be prompted to submit the post-training assessment when you complete the risk management module. Student involvement also offers some additional educational opportunities. We host Constitution and bylaws and financial management workshops 2 to 3 times each semester. It's a great way for student org leaders to critically review handbook guidelines for their org constitutions and obtain ideas for possible improvements or revisions to how they manage their finances or to their Constitution and bylaws document. We don't always provide lunch anymore for these because of low turnout, but we're hoping to increase that turnout. If you're interested in attending any of these presentations outside of student org leader orientation, you can always search for these events in Tech Connect and RSVP as you're interested. Student org leader orientation is a required course you must complete, and then student org risk management training is additional required piece that is included in Solo. Lastly, we'll talk about funding opportunities. Once student organizations become completely compliant with the Office of Student Involvement, they become eligible to apply for SGA funding and any other student organization supplementary funding resources on campus. The SGA office is completely a separate office from student involvement. SGA has their own policies and procedures for requiring orgs to meet requirements to receive SGA funding, and student involvement has our own requirements for student organizations to become compliant, so they are then eligible for SGA funding. So you must become compliant with student involvement first before you reach out to SGA to ask about funding. When you are ready to reach out to SGA to inquire about funding, you need to contact Teresa Davis in the SGA office. If you are interested in pursuing SGA Excellence or Core Values funding through SGA, you then need to reach out to Mike Gunn, who is the director of SGA. And of course, we student involvement team are always here to support you and guide you through your efforts to build a successful student organization, but not necessarily a successful student organization, but more importantly, a sustainable student organization that will be here for years to come. Please know that our office is located in Sub-Suite 203. We have a general office email, which is studentorgs@ttu.edu. We also have an office phone number, which is 806-742-5433. Please, if you're not already, follow us on Instagram. We have two different Instagram accounts. The first one is the handle @GetInvolvedTTU. The audience for this Instagram account is our student body. We are happy to post any student organization events on this Instagram page to help the student body know what your organization is doing on campus. And then our @TTU Student Orgs Instagram account is very much aimed at our student organization leaders themselves, where we post updates, we post announcements. So follow both, but if you're a leader of a student organization, pay close attention to @TTU Student Orgs. And then lastly, our office does offer walk-in office hours on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. and on Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. This is just the beginning of the intent to form new organization formation trainings. Please enjoy the modules that are to come in student org leader orientation for new student organizations. If you have questions as you move through this training, please do not hesitate to reach out to our office. We are here to support you and guide you through this process and wish you the best of luck as you're developing your brand new student organization. And with that, you can move on to the next module. This is the end of the Intent to Form training presentation. Thank you for tuning. Bye-bye.